Everyone thought it was just a routine patrol through the wetlands. But when K9 Max suddenly broke formation and dove headfirst into the murky water, no one could have imagined what he was after. What he pulled out left rangers speechless. What he did next brought them all to tears. Welcome to Heroic Animals, where we bring you true stories of courage, loyalty, and the unbelievable instincts of the animals we too often overlook. If you believe animals are more than pets, they're heroes, subscribe now and join the journey. The Everglades were quiet that morning, too quiet. Ranger Elena had patrolled this stretch of protected land for over 7 years. But something about today felt off. The air was heavier, the birds were silent, and even the frogs had stopped singing. Beside her trotted Max, a 5-year-old Belgian Malinois K9 trained in scent detection and wildlife protection. Normally playful and alert, today Max's body language was different. His ears twitched more than usual. His steps were calculated, and his nose was working overtime. "Elena to base," she said into her radio. "I've got Max acting strange, maybe a scent trail. We're near Cypress Point. Static." "Then, copy that. Proceed with caution." Max suddenly froze. His body stiffened, hackles rising. "Elena to Max, what is it, boy?" she asked, gripping his harness gently. Without warning, Max bolted, straight toward the dense thicket ahead. "Max, no!" Elena shouted, running after him. But before she could reach him, Max leapt into the air, then disappeared into the murky swamp with a splash. Elena's heart dropped. She reached the edge and peered into the dark water. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the water churned. Something was thrashing beneath the surface. Then, a yelp. It was Max. "Elena to base. I need backup at Cypress Swamp now." Max is in the water, engaged with something big. Suddenly, the surface broke. Max's head shot up, jaws locked onto something massive. At first, Elena thought it was a log. But then it moved. It coiled. And she realized it was a python. The python was massive, at least 20 feet long, its thick body undulating through the black water like a living nightmare. Max had his jaws clamped around its midsection, growling and thrashing to keep it from tightening further. Elena stood frozen for half a second, then instinct kicked in. She drew her sidearm, but there was no clean shot. Max was too close, and the snake was writhing wildly. She dropped the gun and dove for a rescue pull instead, fumbling with the metal hook as she waded knee-deep into the muck. "Hold on, Max," she shouted, heart racing. "Don't let go." Suddenly, the python shifted violently, coiling its tail and slamming Max against a submerged log. The dog yelped but didn't release. His body disappeared beneath the surface for one terrifying moment. "Elena to base," she screamed into her radio. "K9 down. Engaged with a python. Need wildlife team now." But the response was only static. Alone, Elena plunged further into the swamp, her boots sinking in the mud. She could see bubbles rising, then fur. Max surfaced again, soaked, his legs kicking wildly. But something else was visible now. Just behind the python's head, something struggling. Something small. At first, she thought it was debris. But then she saw the spotted fur. Ears. Eyes wide with terror. A bobcat kitten. The python wasn't just defending itself, it was feeding. "Oh my God?" Elena whispered. The kitten couldn't have been more than 4 months old. And it was caught in the tightening coils. Its small frame barely able to move. That's what Max had smelled. That's what he had dove in for. He wasn't attacking randomly. He was trying to save it. "Elena, do something," she hissed to herself. The python suddenly lifted its head to strike. Max barked underwater, his jaws still locked on the snake's side, and twisted his body violently. The snake's aim faltered. That gave Elena the opening she needed. She jabbed the rescue pull's hook toward the python's head, latching it behind the jaw and yanking hard. The snake hissed, its body unraveling just slightly, enough for the bobcat to slip free and fall into the shallow water with a splash. Max saw it too. He released the snake, swam toward the kitten, and grabbed it gently by the scruff of its neck. "Elena to Max, get out of there." But the python wasn't done. It turned toward the movement. Lunging blindly, Max swerved, kicking up water, and made for shore with the kitten clenched in his jaws. Elena backpedaled, pulling Max up by the harness as soon as he reached the reeds. He dropped the bobcat beside her, shivering. soaked, but alive. Then he collapsed. Max? Max! Elena cradled his head, water streaming from his fur. His chest rose, but his eyes were glassy. He had taken hits, deep ones, but he never let go. Elena to base, she gasped. We need a medevac, now. This time, the response came through clearly. Rescue en route. She looked down at the kitten, who was curled beside Max, trembling, its tiny paw resting on his soaked coat. And for the first time that morning, Elena cried, because in a world where predators ruled and instincts took over, this dog had chosen to save a life no one expected him to care about. And he wasn't done yet. The Ranger SUV tore through the gravel path as Elena cradled Max's soaked body in the back seat. He was breathing, but barely. Every bump in the road made her heart skip. The kitten, wrapped in her jacket, mewed weakly from the passenger floorboard, too frightened to move. By the time they reached the Wildlife Emergency Center, Max hadn't opened his eyes once. Emergency intake, Elena shouted as she burst through the doors. K9 officer, bitten, crushed, possibly punctured lung, python attack. The vet techs didn't ask questions. They took one look at Max and rushed him into surgery. Elena was left in the hallway, trembling, wet, and still gripping his leash like it was the only thing holding her together. One of the techs came back out with a clipboard. He's got internal bruising, maybe cracked ribs. He's in shock. We'll do everything we can. Please, Elena whispered. He didn't just save me. He saved someone else. She looked down at the kitten in her arms. Hours passed. Elena sat curled on a bench outside the treatment room. Jacket still damp, mud crusted around her boots. The kitten lay in her lap, finally asleep, curled into a tight ball as if trying to make itself disappear. She couldn't stop replaying it in her head, the splash, the coils, the moment Max dragged the tiny creature to safety, only to fall limp himself. It wasn't just heroic, it was selfless. And now, all she could do was wait. A soft voice finally broke the silence. Elena? She turned to see Dr. Hannah Patel, the attending wildlife vet. Her face was calm, but unreadable. Elena stood up instantly. How is he? He's alive, Dr. Patel said gently. He's going to need time. The pressure from the coils caused tissue damage. He's lucky he wasn't crushed entirely. Elena exhaled so hard she nearly dropped to her knees. But he's stable, the vet added, and he should make a full recovery. You got him here just in time. Tears welled up in Elena's eyes. She nodded, lips trembling. Can I see him? Soon. We've sedated him for now. But we did notice something else. Dr. Patel knelt to the kitten, now peeking up sleepily from Elena's lap. She's malnourished, but she's healthy, maybe 2 months old, abandoned or separated, but she never would have survived that python. If your K9 hadn't acted, she'd be. I know, Elena said quietly. He knew. Dr. Patel nodded. Sometimes, animals sense what we don't, what we refuse to. 2 days later, Max opened his eyes. Elena was at his side, curled in a chair next to his recovery crate. He blinked slowly, groggy but alert. You scared the hell out of me. Big guy, she whispered, smiling through tears. You saved her. Max's ears twitched weakly. Then the bobcat kitten, now nicknamed Piper by the staff, padded across the floor and nestled gently against Max's front leg, as if she'd done it 1,000 times before. Max didn't flinch. He let her stay. The center staff couldn't believe it. A K9 officer and a wild animal, species that by all logic should fear each other, lay side by side, breathing in rhythm, healing together. Piper refused to leave his side. And Max didn't seem to mind. What had started as a rescue had become something else. A bond neither of them had asked for. But maybe, just maybe, it was exactly what they both needed. Piper was growing stronger by the day. Her wounds had healed. Her coat gleamed again. She could pounce, hiss, and climb better than any wild-born bobcat her age. The veterinary staff agreed. Within another week, she'd be ready for rewilding. But there was one problem. She wouldn't leave Max. Every time they moved her to the nursery enclosure for exercise, she'd sit at the edge of the fence, eyes locked on the building where Max was resting. If she didn't see him, she'd mule until someone brought her close again. It wasn't just attachment, it was trust. Somehow, in the most violent moment of her life, Max had become her anchor. And Max? He had changed too. The grizzled K9 who once flinched at loud noises and barked at squirrels now let a tiny wildcat crawl into his bed, nap on his tail, and steal his food without complaint. He even nudged her back when she curled up too far from the heater. Elena watched them from the corner of the room one morning, sipping her coffee. "What are we gonna do with you two?" she whispered. A week later, the rewilding team returned with the usual plan: tranquilize, tag, release. Elena shook her head. "You're not going to sedate her," she said firmly. "She's still a wild animal." The ranger in charge argued. "She'll adjust." "No," Elena replied. "You don't understand. She's not just some bobcat anymore. She's bonded, deeply, with him. You separate them, you'll break both." The lead vet nodded in quiet agreement. "Let me try something else." That afternoon, they opened the outdoor enclosure gate. No sedation, no crates, just open woods and freedom. They left the gate wide and waited silently from behind the mesh. Piper sniffed the air. The forest was calling. She stepped outside, slowly. Her paws touched soil for the first time in weeks. Elena held her breath. Piper looked back at Max. Then at the trees. Then back at Max again. The moment stretched endlessly. And then, she walked back. Past the threshold. Back inside. Right up to Max. She pressed her head to his flank. Curled up against him. And closed her eyes. She chose. One of the rangers whispered. The story spread like wildfire through the rescue community. A bobcat that refused freedom. A dog that welcomed a creature he was never trained to protect. Photos of Max and Piper went viral. Journalists called them the unlikely pack. Wildlife magazines printed covers with headlines like, "The K9 and the Bobcat, a bond born in the swamp." But for Max and Piper, none of that mattered. They simply had each other. Today, they live at a certified wildlife sanctuary outside Gainesville, Florida. Max has a private grassy run and warm shelter. Piper has trees to climb, grass to hunt, and a custom-built den she shares, by choice, with her unlikely guardian. Children come to visit on weekends. Not to see tricks, but to hear a story. Of a dog who dove into danger. And a wild heart that chose to stay. The sun was just beginning to rise over the sanctuary as the yellow school bus rumbled up the gravel path. It came once a month, carrying a group of kids from the county's youth program, most of them quiet. Withdrawn, too familiar with loss and distrust for their age. Elena had volunteered to lead this tour herself. Not just because she loved the sanctuary, but because today, she had something special to show them. Something real. The children filed out slowly, clutching their sack lunches and watching everything with tired eyes. Some wore hoodies with the hoods up, even in the Florida heat. A few trailed behind as if waiting for permission to exist in this space. "This place isn't just for animals," Elena said gently, walking backward to face them. "It's for healing, for second chances." She paused at a large fenced enclosure surrounded by oak trees and dappled light. "And sometimes," she added, "the most powerful healing comes from those who were never supposed to survive." Max was already up, though his movements were slower these days. His eyes were still sharp. He stood near the shaded edge of the enclosure, tail low but wagging gently as he saw Elena approach. Right behind him, Piper stretched from a branch, leapt to the ground, and landed with effortless grace. She trotted up beside him, rubbing her face gently against his neck. The kids stopped in their tracks. "A dog, and a bobcat?" one of the boys murmured. Elena nodded. "Meet Max and Piper." He saved her life from a 20-foot python. Risked his own to do it. A girl near the back, barely 10 years old, arms wrapped tight across her chest, spoke softly. "Why?" Elena looked at her. "Because that's who he is." Even though no one asked him to. The group stood in silence. Then one of the older boys took a hesitant step forward. "Are they, like, always together?" "Every day," Elena replied. She had the chance to leave, to go free, but she chose to stay. He nodded slowly, then said something that made Elena's chest tighten. Maybe she just didn't want to be alone anymore. The visit lasted nearly an hour. At first, the children kept their distance. But soon, they were sitting in the grass, watching Piper chase a butterfly across the enclosure and Max lumber after her like a gentle guardian. The girl in the hoodie eventually came closer. She knelt at the fence. Piper padded up, cautious but curious, and pressed her nose to the mesh. The girl didn't speak. She just reached out, her fingers trembling slightly, until they hovered just opposite Piper's face. A moment passed, then another, and then the girl smiled. Not a big smile, but the kind that meant something had shifted. Back at the bus, one of the counselors pulled Elena aside. "I've never seen them this quiet," she said. "Usually we have to pull them away from the woods. They don't want to listen. Don't want to feel." Elena nodded. "Sometimes they just need to see that broken doesn't mean useless. Or dangerous." Exactly. As the bus pulled away, the girl in the hoodie waved out the window. Elena waved back. Behind her, Max sat down in the dirt, his body worn but proud. And beside him, Piper climbed onto a flat stone, blinked in the sunlight, and rested her paw against his shoulder. They weren't a rescue story anymore. They were a reminder. That family doesn't have to look like you. That love doesn't have to make sense. And that sometimes, healing starts with the ones who never gave up on each other. It arrived on a Tuesday morning, tucked in a plain white envelope with no return address. The handwriting was neat but hesitant, like someone who had taken great care with every letter. Elena almost didn't open it. She had just returned from Max's morning check-in, where he and Piper had shared a nap in the sun after their usual walk. Max was slower now, his back legs stiffer, but Piper never strayed far. She had become his shadow. The letter sat on her desk like it had been waiting. She unfolded it carefully. "Dear Sanctuary staff, you don't know me. I was on that school bus a few weeks ago. I sat in the back and didn't say anything. I never say anything. I'm not good at being around people. I've lived in 4 foster homes. I've had a lot of adults lie to me. I don't trust anyone. But when I saw Max and Piper, I believed in something for the first time. That someone would fight for me. That someone could stay with me. They don't even talk, and yet they said everything I needed to hear. So I just wanted to say thank you. For letting me see them. For showing me what love actually looks like." Elena stared at the letter for a long time. Then she folded it gently and walked outside. Toward the enclosure. Max was lying near the shady edge, his chest rising and falling in slow rhythm. Piper was perched above him on her favorite branch, watching the breeze through the trees. Elena knelt by the fence and slid the letter into her jacket pocket. "You saved someone else again," she whispered. Max didn't move, but his eyes flicked toward her. Tired but aware, she reached through the mesh and scratched behind his ear. "You're not just a hero because of what you did in the swamp," she said softly. "You're a hero because of what you still do. Every single day." She looked up at Piper, who had climbed down and sat beside Max, resting her small head on his flank. "You remind people they're not alone," Elena said. And then, because no one else could hear her, she added, "Even me." That week, Elena did something she hadn't done before. She framed the letter and mounted it near the sanctuary's entrance, just below a plaque that read, "The story of Max and Piper, courage without condition." Beneath the glass, she added a small line in gold foil. "You never know who's watching, or who needs you most." Visitors began stopping at the display first, reading the letter before walking into the sanctuary. Many left quietly, wiping their eyes. Some left notes of their own. One woman left behind a folded photo of her son, who had taken his life the year before. Another left a sketch of Max and Piper curled together under a tree. Elena began receiving emails from teachers, therapists, even a corrections officer who used their story during the group therapy session for troubled teens. And all of it stemmed from one moment. One dog, one leap into the swamp, one impossible rescue. By the time the sanctuary held its Max and Piper Day, the following month, the event was overflowing. Children painted murals, families brought their adopted pets, and in the center of it all, Max, now mostly gray-faced and a little stiff, sat quietly, tail thumping as kids gathered around him. Piper stayed close, watchful, and calm. The two were more than animals now. They were symbols of healing, of second chances, of choosing to stay when everyone else walks away. Max was slowing down. It wasn't sudden, it was subtle. A little more hesitation before standing up. A shorter walk before resting. A deeper sleep in the mornings. Piper noticed first. She began curling closer at night, refusing to leave his side. Even when the staff opened her favorite climbing pen. When Max didn't follow her like he usually did, she stayed with him instead. Elena watched quietly, heart heavy. She had seen this before, in older service dogs who had given everything and asked for nothing. But Max was different. He wasn't just a working dog. He was the heart of the sanctuary. And to Piper, he was everything. One chilly morning, Elena found Max lying in the sun, eyes closed, chest rising slowly. Piper was pressed beside him, her small body gently rising and falling in rhythm with his. He didn't stir when Elena knelt next to him. But when she whispered, "Hey, buddy," his tail thumped once. She placed a blanket over him. He looked at her, tired, soft, and then at Piper. And then he closed his eyes. The sanctuary held a memorial the next day. They didn't call it a funeral. It didn't feel right to use human words for something that went deeper than language. They simply gathered around Max's favorite tree, where the sun always hit just right, and laid him to rest beneath its roots. The community came out in full. Children who had met Max came with drawings. Rangers came in uniform. Rescue workers brought wreaths of native plants. But it was Piper who broke everyone's heart. She sat by the grave long after everyone else had gone. She didn't cry. Cats don't, but she didn't move. She stayed for hours, curled on the earth, as if guarding him in death the way he had protected her in life. That night, Elena stayed late at the sanctuary. She lit a small candle beside the plaque that now read, "Max, K9 officer, swamp rescuer, bobcat's guardian, hero without hesitation." As she locked up, she heard a soft cry. Piper. She was standing near Max's tree, but something was different. She wasn't alone. At her side was another small creature. A bobcat kitten. Tiny. Frail. No older than Piper had been the day Max pulled her from the swamp. Elena's breath caught. Piper nudged the kitten forward with her nose, guiding it, protecting it, just as Max had once done for her. The staff was stunned. There had been no sign of other bobcats in the area. No abandoned kittens in the intake system. No recent rescues. It was as if the kitten had appeared, because Piper knew. Because she was ready. Max's gift wasn't just the life he saved. It was the life Piper was now willing to share. She began caring for the kitten immediately, cleaning it, guiding it around the enclosure, watching over it with that same silent, steady presence Max once gave her. And when the sanctuary introduced the kitten to visitors, Piper stayed close, fierce, tender, brave, like a shadow of the dog she had once chosen to follow. Elena stood near the enclosure a week later, watching the two of them nap under the same tree where Max had been laid to rest. A volunteer stepped beside her and said, "It's like she became him." Elena nodded, voice thick. No, she became herself, but he showed her how. In that moment, everything came full circle. The swamp, the rescue, the silence between species, the choice to stay, and the lesson Max had left behind for all of them. That the strongest hearts don't just fight. They teach, they give, they protect, even when they're gone. Spring came early that year. The sanctuary grounds bloomed with fresh color, soft greens, bursts of orange and purple, birdsong returning like a long-held breath. It had been 3 months since Max's passing. And yet, his presence lingered in every shadow and shaft of light. Especially through Piper. She had changed. Not just in the way she moved or watched over the kitten, now named Finn by the staff, but in the way she led. She walked the fence lines with a quiet confidence. She guided Finn to the highest perches, then waited patiently until he leapt. And when visitors came, she no longer stayed hidden. She stood where they could see her. Not for show, but for understanding. Elena received a letter that week. It was from a wildlife refuge in the northern part of the state. They had just launched a program to help retired working dogs transition into teaching companions, animals who would live in open-range sanctuaries and help soothe rescue animals during recovery. The program was called the Max Initiative. In the letter, they wrote, "Your K9 showed us that trauma doesn't define you, what you do with it does. We want to honor that by letting other dogs become the bridge between fear and trust." Just like he was. Elena stared at the letter for a long time, then looked out toward the tree where Max was buried. The plaque shimmered faintly in the morning sun. And she smiled. That weekend, the sanctuary held its largest community day to date. Over 200 people came, families, veterans, foster children, search and rescue teams. At the heart of the gathering was a new bronze statue, recently unveiled with donations from across the country. It showed Max and Piper side by side. Max crouched low, alert. Piper standing tall on a log, tail curled over her back. And between them? A small bobcat cub, Finn, looking up at both. Beneath it was carved a single line. He saved her. She chose him. Together, they changed everything. In the months that followed, Piper did what no one could have expected. She helped other rescues adjust. 2 orphaned raccoons, frightened and shaking, began to eat only after watching her. A red fox with a broken leg, normally aggressive toward every other animal, sat quietly when Piper approached and lay near her. It was as if the calm Max had given her was now flowing through her into the world. Visitors often asked Elena, "Is it really the same bobcat from the Python story?" And Elena would nod. "She's more than the same." She'd say, "She's everything that came after." As for Finn, he grew fast and wild. By late summer, he began spending more time alone in the trees, hunting, climbing, sleeping far from the enclosure's edge. The rewilding team came again, this time with a softer approach. They opened the gate and waited. One morning, just as the sun broke over the forest line, Finn walked out. He looked back once. Piper stood at the threshold. Still, no fear, no sadness, only pride. Finn blinked and vanished into the wild. That evening, Piper returned to the shade beneath Max's tree. She curled into the grass where he once lay. Not alone, not broken, but whole, because love doesn't leave, it lives. In paw prints, in shadows, in stories told around bonfires and bedtime, in legacies built one act of bravery at a time. It was nearly a year to the day since Max had passed. The sanctuary had grown in quiet ways, more animals, more visitors, more stories whispered beneath Max's tree. Piper remained its quiet guardian, still choosing to live among humans, though her soul clearly belonged to the wild. But something strange happened that spring. A call came in from a ranger station 60 miles north. A lone juvenile bobcat had been spotted hovering near a highway. It wasn't injured, it wasn't aggressive, but it refused to leave. It had a scar above its right eye. And it wore a GPS tag, one registered to Finn. Elena stood at the edge of the sanctuary gate, heart pounding, as the wildlife team rolled up with the transport crate. He didn't need to be rescued, one of the rangers explained. But he wouldn't leave the spot. Just kept circling, like he was looking for something. They opened the crate, and out stepped Finn, bigger, stronger, more wild than ever. But his eyes scanned the sanctuary like he knew exactly where he was. He moved fast, straight through the path, past the visitor area, past Max's statue, to the enclosure, where Piper was already waiting. The reunion was wordless. Piper stepped forward. Finn paused, then lowered his head. She bumped her nose to his. No growls, no tension, just recognition. Then she turned and walked. And he followed. Together again. No one knew why Finn had returned. He had survived, thrived. He belonged to the wild. But some bonds go deeper than instinct. Maybe he came back to say goodbye. Maybe he came back to stay. No one asked. No one needed to. In the following weeks, something even more surprising unfolded. Finn didn't just reconnect with Piper. He began approaching other animals, guiding them, staying near the newest rescues. One day, staff caught him gently leading a frightened baby deer around the enclosure's edge. Another, he stood silently outside the vet's cabin as a wounded owl recovered inside. Elena watched from afar, smiling through tears. "He's becoming her," she whispered, and then caught herself. "No, he's becoming them." On the first anniversary of Max's passing, the sanctuary held a candlelight ceremony beneath his tree. Piper sat on one side. Finn sat on the other. Visitors came forward and placed candles, notes, even old leashes and collars in tribute to animals they had loved and lost. A child approached the microphone and whispered, "I used to think animals were just animals. Then I met Max. And now, I want to be like him." The sanctuary is quiet again now. But not still. Piper walks the fence lines. Finn circles her like a silent echo. And every so often, a new arrival will lie down between them, guided by something invisible but felt. A legacy not written in stone, but in instinct, in choice, in love passed down, one paw print at a time. Max didn't just save a life. He created one. And Piper? She carried it forward, through every choice, every connection, every quiet act of trust. Together, they reminded us that even in a world of chaos, instinct and love can still rewrite the ending. Pa, thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to Heroic Animals for more true stories of animal courage, devotion, and transformation. Speech balloon, and in the comments below, tell us, what does this story mean to you? What would you have done if you were Max or Piper? Until the next hero steps forward, stay kind, stay brave, and never underestimate the power of instinct.